I got my homeboy Pete Craig with me. And we letting everybody know we got a dream. Yo, stay focused. Keep moving forward. It's on the way. Keep that dream alive. If you got a dream, don't look to the left, nor the right, let's go.
Your faith is in Jesus. Completion is here before you even begin. Dreaming big of my life in the future. Already knowing that it's not far. Having the passion to work towards Jesus. I'm gonna keep my faith and swagger going hard. Don't do the right. Just push straight. You don't have to fear more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Yolanda Jerry Show. I am your host, Yolanda, and tonight I'm excited about our special guest that we're all going to have because this lady is going to be sharing her heart and her story about overcoming transitions. So listen, please share this broadcast, tag someone into this live broadcast, whether it's a mother, friend, cousin, a child, a nephew, or uncle. It doesn't matter who you invite. We're going to make sure that her heart is shared, her story is shared, so that way it may be something that will be positively impacting for those who are viewing and listening. So again, please share this out, and we'll be right back after this 30-second promo.
Welcome to the Dr. Yolanda Jerry Show, where you will hear stories from people who have experienced hell on earth and have walked past hell to share their stories. You will also hear what they are doing now and how their businesses, nonprofits, and ministries were birthed from their past trauma. So let's empower the world, one story at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Yolanda Jerry.
And we are back. I am your host, Dr. Yolanda Jerry. So look, let me go ahead and just tell you about this woman of God who is going to be blessing us on tonight. She is known for chasing God's heart, being a follower of Christ, a doer of his word, and a servant to his people. Carlotta Pace holds degrees in social work and is a licensed therapist in the state of Ohio, 3-time best-selling author, certified mindset coach, community organizer, and a motivational/empowerment speaker. Carlotta is the founder and operator of I Was Here, LLC, and Caterpillar 7. Carlotta believes in inspiring others, and in discovering herself, she found that self-love and awareness must be intentional. Carlotta is known for believing that showing up is great, but showing up as you and for you is what's needed. So without further ado, everybody, let's get it together and help me welcome Carlotta Pace to the show. Hello, Carlotta. Welcome to my show, the Dr. Yolanda Jerry Show.
Hello. How are you? Thank you for having me, Dr. Yolanda.
I am doing well. Well, look, you're welcome. Look, I'm excited about having you on the show tonight. You know, the show is about having real conversations with real people, you know, and hopefully it will be something that will be life-changing for whoever's going to be tuning in and watching tonight. So our title, of course, is called Overcoming Transitions. But before we start talking about you and your story, I want to ask you a question. And that question is, look, I want to know a little bit more about you. And I'm sure everybody else want to know a little bit more about you too. as far as like where you're from, what was your childhood like, and anything else that you want us to know, because we know your professional bio. I just told it to the
Right.
world. So let's hear it from you.
Yes. So, Dr. Yolanda, I am from Akron, Ohio. I am, let's see, for my mother, I am the second oldest. My mother had 5 children. My father also has 5 children, and I'm the second oldest on that side as well. Growing up, I mean, wasn't always the easiest, but I have truly, truly, truly now understand that it's a lot of things I went through that were actually the good days, right? But as a child, I always loved education. I always liked helping people for real. I went through some different things in my life. I was sexually abused. I went through some neglect and abuse. And because of those things, there were times in my life where I dealt with anxiety and depression very early on. But there was also like very, very good times in my life. I love school, right? So that was usually my way out. Like I would do everything at school, whether it was the step team, cheerleading, basketball. Outside of my professionalism, the community is so important to me because I feel like when my parents couldn't see me, there were people in the community that did. And so I did a lot of things in the community. I did the step team. Very early, I started coaching people that were older than me, Dr. Yolanda. So I did I was a coach for the step team, but I also was on the step team. I did basketball, absolutely loved it. And so as I got older, I just started to coach and mentor in those same avenues because I kind of always knew that it was important because somebody's seeing me. You know what I mean? It was really like the way that I was able to see myself and the way that I was able to grow. Because I didn't see a lot of people doing it around me in the beginning. It was hard, but is what I loved. I mean, I honestly loved it. I really do love people in general. And so I enjoy doing those things. Outside of that, I don't know. I'm a mom. I love my babies. I'm a grandma of about to be 3 children. 3 grandchildren. I was a single mother of 4 children. And I don't know. I have learned, Dr. Yolanda, to love life. I really, and for me, I feel like that's a big deal because I have not always felt that way. Being a community advocate, being who I am in the community and to my children and to children who look up to me, such as my godchildren or just children who I've adopted along the way. That's one of the most important things to me outside of just serving God.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I listen to you now. One of the things I think we have in common, right off the bat, is just being a survivor of sexual assault. Right, that's one of those things, and also, but one of the fun things that we probably have to share that's alike is you say you're on a step team, and I know I was
Yes.
on the dance team in high school and junior high school. So, and that was one of the fun things that I enjoyed doing, where people did see us, right? Where people did see
Yep.
us and we felt like we was doing our part in contributing, but I also know that as children, we go through things and not necessarily knowing how they will affect us as we get older, and then also affect our children, even if we have any children, if we don't deal with certain things,
Yes, ma'am.
early on. So, I know that you're, a licensed therapist and, you're also a coach and an author, but I want to kind of peel back the onion a little bit and let's talk about before you became, this person, because there were things that you have gone through. And as you see, tonight's show is about overcoming major transitions. And so you didn't say overcoming major transition, you said overcoming major transition. So there were several, right?
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
that you had to overcome. And so I like to dig into a little bit of that tonight, if that's okay with you. So I'm going to turn it over to you. So what was one of those things? We'll start out with the first one. What is one of those transitions that you had to overcome? I always tell people don't sugarcoat nothing,
Yeah.
share, because, the only way we can help people heal in this world is if we share our truth and we share it with, telling them the good, the bad, and the ugly, not necessarily just telling them, okay, yeah, I overcame sexual assault or I overcame domestic violence, but what did that look like? So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Carlotta.
Okay. I think that the first thing that I had to overcome truly was my birth. I feel like I was born into a situation that was not the best. My mother was married to my older sibling's dad, and my father was a pimp. You know, that was his profession, that was his career, and so I seen a lot very early. But both of my parents were early on; they were in and out in reference to providing the care for me and being a caretaker. I had a grandmother who originally at the earlier part of my life who did most things for me, but she died when I was about 9 years old. So I think that the first thing that I had to experience is really understanding why I was here, why I was born. Um, Not that my mother had ever been like, oh, I don't like you, I don't love you, but she was not present. Early on, my mother suffered from mental health issues that were undiagnosed. I know we're in, mental health month. And so I talk a lot about how when I was a younger child, my mother had mental health issues that never got diagnosed until me and my older sister got older. And we started telling people like, something is not right. Like my mom can go from being extremely nice and loving and kind to just this complete other person. And so she utilized alcohol to really self-medicate some of her pain and suppress the things that she was going through, experiencing, hearing. I didn't know that early on, right? And so I just knew that I was born in a place and people didn't want me. People didn't desire to have me around. People didn't desire to have me in the room. And so my mother and father were not together outside of her pregnancy. And so by the time I was 2 years old, my mother was with my stepfather from the time that I was 2 to 19. And unfortunately, he was a stepfather that was very abusive. He was abusive to my mother and verbally abusive to me and my older sister. So we just experienced a lot of stuff that should not have happened, in reference to how we were treated, how things went in our home. So I learned very early a lot of dysfunction that I didn't know was dysfunction, right? I just thought that everybody lived like this. I thought that, everything that people experienced had to look like this because this is what it looks like in my home. So I think that that's really the first thing. And I think as I've grown through life, I have learned that learning who I was, what had a great deal to do with me moving past those things and being able to transition. Early on, I had anxiety, asthma, depression, a lot of the things that I feel like my mother was experiencing in her relationship, I was kind of taking on. So like, for example, if she was called a name or she was hit, it was like it was me being hit, right? And so early on, my stepfather did not at all target his anger towards my sister and I, but he would say things such as, well, they were already here before I got here. They don't belong to me. They don't. So it just always made me feel like I didn't fit. And then as I got older, you can't put your hands on my mom, right? So I became a physical fighter. Now we got to fight because I'm watching somebody abuse my mother and that doesn't work for me. And so I'm a teenager and I'm fighting an adult man. And a lot of times when we would get done with the fight, my mother would be mad at me and my sister. And so it was just difficult to understand. It was difficult to move through. And a lot of my childhood, I spent really wondering, like, why was I born? Why did I exist? And if I would ever find a place inside of me that would allow me to just be. I really struggled with that early on. So then I think the next thing would be the domestic violence. More so than anything else.
I don't mean to cut you off, but before we move into the domestic violence part, I want to go back to the part about, not knowing why I'm here. Is there a reason for me being here? Because your mom had gone through her mental health issues and, dealing with alcoholism and those kind of things. And then also hearing you saying that she also would get mad at you. So basically like putting this other man, making him a priority instead of making you and your sibling a priority, right? So,
yes, ma'am.
As you became a teenager, you saw things that weren't right and you were being combative. But do you think that was because of out of love, or that was out of fear, or what do you think that would be?
On my mom's part?
Mm-hmm.
So gratefully, Dr. Yolanda, I was able to talk to my mom before she passed away about some of those things. And then I just thought it was because she didn't like me, if I be all the way honest. I just felt like
Wow.
I wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't married to my mother was a woman who believed in love. She believed in marriage. And so my older sister's dad, they were married when my mother was about 13 years old. My mother actually dropped out of school in like the 7th or 8th grade to provide for my older sister. And she remarried her father twice, right? Her father went to jail for one of the issues that he went to jail for was physically abusing my mother. And then when he went to prison, my mother got pregnant with me. After pregnancy, she was no longer with my father. And then all of a sudden, it's this other guy. And I just felt like she just really didn't want me. She really didn't desire me to be a part of their family. Now, this is funny, but this is something that I had to deal with along the way. I always thought it was like such a bad thing because I had a different last name than them. And that might sound crazy, but everybody had a last name to identify with someone else. And I didn't, right? And so that's one of the things that affected me when I started having children. I was just like, oh, I don't care if I'm not married. Everybody having my last name. And I still believe it, but I don't hold it the way I used to hold it. Like it was trauma for me. It was, I needed to make sure that no child in my house ever felt like they were by themselves. Because I just used to look at those small things and it didn't feel like it fitted. When me and my mother talked about it, 3 years before my mother passed, my mother started to really feel like it was her time. And she started talking to me about some of those things, like, you know, that she never understood it was hurting us in the way that it was. And she felt like she was making those decisions because she didn't want other men around us. She felt like if the man was only targeting his anger at her, then it wasn't somehow affecting us. And so she was doing it out of what she thought was love.
Wow. It's amazing. You know, they say love is blind. And you know, it's like, you know, you focus on that one thing or that one person, and it seems like everything else that's attached to you doesn't even matter, you know.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate. But I'm glad that you and your mom had that conversation, because basically what you were dealing with in so many words is identity crisis. You know, like,
Yes.
Why am I here? You know, am I supposed? Is there a purpose for me? You know, especially when you didn't feel loved, and you said that you didn't. I mean, everybody else, you had a different last name from everybody else, so you probably felt like a burden or outcast, and all kinds of things going through your head. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All the time. And then it was kind of awkward because my father's mother was the one who was assisting in raising me. So literally my father would come to the door and talk to everybody else and just walk past me. And so it just was always awkward. It was literally like I did not fit. I didn't fit in the world. I didn't fit in the family. I didn't fit. At least I didn't feel that way.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm glad to hear that you and your mom did have a conversation before she left here. So when, you know, with her leaving here, were you all able to come to a point where it was a loving relationship before she transitioned?
Thankfully, yes. We actually started working on it when I gave birth to my first child. I had my first child when I was 19 years old, and my mother absolutely loved my children. I'm talking about, she was just, to me, it was like, who are you? Right? Like, who is this person? Because I didn't know her when I was a kid, but it allowed me to see a different part of her. And thankfully, I was able to allow her to love them, because early on, we didn't deal with the stuff. We just kept like acting like it didn't happen, like it didn't exist, but things were awkward. My mother didn't like tell me she loved me a lot or hug me, and so as I got older and she would start to do those things, I was just like, wait, like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? It's because the love that she had given to them, to my children, she didn't give to me. And so I was okay with it, even though I wasn't okay, if that makes sense. Like, I had learned that she would extend her love to other people, love that she never extended to me. But that last 3 years, we got to a whole nother level. Like, it was literally like, I wish that I would have got it with my father, but I didn't. But I do. I feel like I was able to forgive for things that were so deeply rooted. Like I never disrespected my mom, but I just didn't feel like in the beginning, I didn't feel like she could really give me any advice. You know what I mean? Like I felt like,
Right.
how can you give me advice? Like I feel like you didn't try to parent. You were not there for us. You were not present. And even when you could have been present, there was this man present that was always taking over everything we did. And I know now that it was fear. You know, my mother did believe it was love, but it was definitely fear. And then my
Right.
mother had been so much that the stuff I was going through at that time, she felt was minute. You know, my mother was raped by people in her family that were still
Right.
around. And so when she was giving me advice, she thought that was the best thing to do. She thought that it wasn't as bad as what she went through. And so she was doing her best. My mother always had big wishes for us. Like, you know, she wanted us to graduate from school. She wanted us to be better than her. Like, she was never like the type of person where she wanted to see us doing bad. But she just didn't push past some of her own stuff enough to be able to be more for us as her children.
Right.
And I feel like she was able to fix some of that with my younger siblings. I have siblings that are 10 years younger. Again, she's a different person. You know, when we got some of the diagnosis done, she separated from her husband when I was 19. So my siblings were still at the house and they got to see a really beautiful side of my mom. You know, I'm grateful that I got to see it eventually, but it caused me a lot of wounds.
I understand. That's a blessing, though, to know that you at least got a little bit of, of a relationship with her before she transitioned. And with, I always tell people we never know what our parents have gone through, what they had been dealing with, and a lot of that filters over into generations and generations to come. And so if we don't deal with it, or we don't find a way to deal with it, or even if they didn't even know, because you're a therapist. I mean, that might not have been available. That wasn't a thing back then, right? When she was dealing with the things she was dealing with. And then the education piece too. The abuse that she was going through, that was probably the normal life of living for her back then, and seeing that even when she was growing up, that was a norm. So she didn't see anything different, and I always say, that's where we have to sometimes even give our parents grace, because they did the best that they could with what they had. And if we get to a place where we can forgive them, that's even more powerful, and then you can never go back and change what has happened, but you can make the future different when you decide to take a different approach. So I thank God that you did get to a point to where you were able to have some type of relationship with your mother before she transitioned, and your siblings too as well, and your grandchildren. So good stuff. Well, we're going to go to a commercial break, and then we're going to come back and start talking about that other transition that you had to overcome before I cut you off, and we'll be right back. And that is none other than Believe in Your Dreams TV network. The bus has left the station. Look, if you're looking to expand your network or looking to expand your brand or your show, you can join with Believe in Your Dreams TV network. That is the visionary Dr. Nicole Peters. Check them out at www.believeinyourdreamstv.com. Again, you can connect and contact them at www.believeinyourdreamstv.com. All right, Carlotta. So look, you dropped that bomb. There's another thing. We talked about sexual assault. We talked about, the things, with your mom and having to overcome, the identity crisis piece and getting to a place where there was forgiveness. But now here it is, you have experienced something just like I have experienced, domestic violence. So let's talk about that part.
Yeah. So again, my mother went through domestic violence most of her life. What I learned is that her mother was on the other end of domestic violence. So her mother was more abusive physically to her husband. And then my mother had accepted domestic violence from her first and second husband. And I used to think, Dr. Yolanda, that looking at the domestic violence was the roughest part of it. What I didn't understand was all the things it was leaving on me, in reference to my self-esteem, in reference to just the small things that would trigger me, in reference to like, I had this hard shell of stay away from me. I don't need you to love me. I'm gonna learn to love myself. I'm gonna figure it out, because if that's what love is like, I just don't want it. And then this overcompensating that I do and have done with everybody, right? Like I'm learning now to put myself first. I'm learning now to do self-care. And one of the last things I'll talk about with my transition is my health. And my health is what made me start paying attention to myself. But the domestic violence stuff really made me kind of like pacify everybody. I was the peacemaker in the house. I was the adult in the house. I was the person who needed to make sure the bills got paid. I was the person who wanted to make sure the dishes was done. Because if the dishes wasn't done, then there was going to be a fight somewhere else. If the food wasn't cooked, it was just a lot of stuff that I tried to pacify, and it didn't belong to me. And you learn those things, and until you unlearn them, you really carry them into other relationships. And so very early on, when I started dating, it was difficult, because I was first just like, well, so long as he don't hit me, I'm good. Like I wasn't looking for nothing else. Like, what about the qualities, the work, so you know what I mean? Like all the other things were not clicking to me originally. Mm-hmm. And so early on with my children's father, I feel like I let him off the hook a lot, because I just wanted him to be present. I just wanted my kids to have their father. I didn't want to do all the different last names and then different people. And it was just so much, so many things that it left on me that I didn't recognize in the beginning. As I grew, I feel like God was teaching me at different levels, different stuff that I had to deal with, but not all at the same time. I always say that God is a graceful God, right? So he doesn't just be like, oh, boom, deal with everything today. No.
Right.
But
that's right.
Slowly he started showing me myself. He started showing me how, when I was in a relationship with their father, and this might sound crazy to people, but this is the truth. I remember one time he laid on the couch, right? And somebody came in the house, and I just felt like whenever somebody come in the house, I naturally get up and go to the room. And he really just stayed on the couch. Well, I put him out, right? Because for me, that was you trying to make my friend not come back over. And it was like all this controlling stuff that was going on that wasn't really present at that time. It was the fact that that's what my stepfather used to do, because he didn't want my mother to have company. So he would make other people very uncomfortable in the house just so that she would not have friends. And so, I'm like, oh, you ain't gonna make me not have no friends. I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. And so even thinking about being a wife, I just started thinking about being a wife within the last several years. When early on, I really kind of let go of all those things. As a little girl, I wanted to be a wife, but as I grew, the more I seen, the enemy was really hardening my heart. And so I did not want to be a wife, because I felt like it was a reference to all of that. It was domestic violence. It was the anger I seen. It was the hurt I seen. It was the tears I seen. And so I had to unlearn those things. I feel like it definitely impacted my self-esteem. It definitely impacted relationships. Some good, bad, but it impacted me. I feel like there may have been some people along the way that I lost, Dr. Yolanda, that may have been good for me, but I couldn't see that. Well, early on, I'll never forget, I dated this guy, and we had never touched, had never kissed. We literally had just hugged and dated, right? And he was like, well, I really want to marry you. I feel like you're a good person. I mean, I'm like 19, right? I'm like, you tripping. You know what I mean? Like, like, you don't know me. You know what I mean? You don't know the things I've been through. You don't know. And I completely separated myself. Wow. And then I start being like, dang, that's really what it's supposed to look like. It is supposed to look like that. Like they're supposed to be able to see something in me that other people can't see. They're not supposed to want to use me or misuse me to say they're going to marry me. But it took me to go through so many different things to get to a place where I understood that, right. Even though my mother was a strong advocate for marriage, what I would hear her say is, Carlotta, you got to just stop being so hard. You got to let people love you. And I'm like, but this is what you taught me. I don't know how to be anything else. I don't know how to let my guard down. I don't know how to be passive. I don't know how. I really, I think that sometimes people used to think that I would be like just saying that to say it. I wasn't. I really didn't know how. I really didn't know how to be submissive. I really didn't, because I felt like submission meant pain and everything that I seen people go through, and I didn't want that.
Right.
And so that piece is difficult for me. And then unfortunately, I had to deal with some stuff. I dealt more with emotional abuse than physical. But because my self-esteem was impacted, I just used to be like, whatever, I can say the same thing, or I can give the same attitude back, or I'm controlling my life because I'm still going to school. I'm controlling my life because I'm still, being an advocate. I'm controlling my life because you can't make me homeless. I watched my mother save up her money for 2-3 years to buy a home. We pull up to get this home, and my stepfather had taken every penny from the bank, and we were homeless. So for me, I'm like, nobody's ever going to do that to me, And so I'm just controlling all this stuff that really wasn't what I needed to be looking for. You know what I mean? And so it definitely curved my attitude and my behavior. And like I said, some of it was good, some of it was not so good, because I think that along the way, I definitely missed some things. I definitely made some mistakes that I didn't have to make. And early on, Dr. Yolanda, I didn't want to let my guard down. I didn't feel protected when I did that. I didn't feel covered when I did that. And so it's really, if I be all the way honest, losing my parents allowed me to put my guard down.
Wow.
Yeah, it's almost like it unchained me. And so it was always like this. I thought I was putting my guard down. I thought I was doing the things I needed to do. But man, I'm telling you, when my mother died, I could see myself.
Wow. It was that much of a hold on you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and it's like, because I had become the parent to everybody. I was my mother's parent. I was my father's parent. I was my children's parent. I was my cousin's parent. I was people in my family who didn't have nobody. I want everybody to have somebody, not thinking of myself. I don't want nobody to feel dropped. I don't want nobody to feel neglected. I was over parenting and over compensating everybody.
And not taking care of self.
Not at all.
You had nothing left, and you had nothing left for yourself because you gave it to everybody else.
Yep. And if I be honest, I feel like I never thought that I was a gem. I never thought that I was a diamond. I never thought that I was beautiful. I never thought that I was worthy. And so I lived life thinking, and it's sad to say, but it's the truth. Even when you're in church, you're learning based off what you see, right? And then not to mention how people act, right? So early on, I was a leader. I was a leader in the church, and I had women who, most of them were married, and their children loved me, right? So I had, I was over the youth group. I helped with anything that needed to be done, again, because I'm overdoing it, right? I'm doing whatever. I'm tired to no end, but I'm consistently doing what I thought was necessary to save my life, to be honest. Because I felt like if I didn't do that, then I would be struggling with something else. And I would go to that next. But, early on, I had a drinking problem. I don't even remember the age that I started drinking, but I had a drinking problem. By the time I was in high school, I was an alcoholic. And so in order to run from that, I ran to church. But when I ran to church, there were so many people who, some with knowing, some without knowing, who were teaching me the wrong stuff all over again. Right. So if you didn't, I've always kind of been small. And so if you wasn't overweight, or if you wasn't, and I hate to say that, but that's really what it was. That's what I felt. Then you're at church trying to be fast. Or if you wear a certain thing, then why you wear that? You trying to get my boyfriend. Like, I'm really just trying to be here to save my soul for real. And so I'm really not focused on your husband, your boy. It wasn't in my sight, but a lot of people said a lot of things that was very damaging. And I feel like had not the pastor of the church began to see different things, I don't know what would have happened to me based off of that, right? I feel like I had a very good leader. Dr. Deborah Graham was my pastor for so many years. She became my godmother, but she was my pastor originally, and she just seen me. And so when I say that, I mean spiritually, she's seen me. And so she just started to say little stuff like, well, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? Or well, why did that happen? And you don't have to, you can look cute. You can. And so it was hard for me because I felt like people were giving me messages of, oh, well, if you come with your hair done or you come like this, then why you, oh, what you trying to do? You know what I mean? And so there was women who made me feel so insecure about looking cute. So now I don't want to look like this, but I don't really know what to look like, right? In the place that I ran to, there were so many adults who frowned upon how I led because I wasn't like them. I've always been different, always learned different. I'm an observer. I talk, like if I'm one-on-one, I'm probably going to give you some good conversation. But when I'm in larger settings, I don't talk a lot. And so people very often be like, okay, well, you know, what's her agenda? What's this or what's that? And not knowing that some people really just in church because they want to learn about themselves. They want to learn about God. They want to learn how to save themselves from hell.
That's right.
I felt like I was living hell. And I really wanted an escape. And I just thank God for Pastor Deborah Graham, because I know that without her seeing me, my life would have been a lot different, you know. So as she began to kind of take me in and mentor me and guide me and teach me, I was able to learn a little more. And then one of the other things that helped was, even then, I went to counseling when I became a mom. I was horrified to be a mom. I'm talking about crying, like, what am I going to do? I can't do this. Nobody's ever showed me how to be a mom. I'm going to mess my kids up. Like, God is going to hold me accountable for, you know, jacking these kids up. So it just, early on, I had all these fears. I had all these triggers. And to be honest, I didn't understand them. You know what I mean? I knew that they existed, but I didn't understand them. And so as my academics grew, I started to understand what I was experiencing. But when I was young, nobody talked about anxiety and depression.
Right.
Nobody talked about, you know, you going through this because this is what you feel. And so, you know, when she started doing that and telling me, like, look, I'm going to counsel you, but I need you to also go see a mental health therapist. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so it was, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Well, let me do this. And nobody was talking about it, but just her giving me that direction and my ability to be obedient. Even then, again, it just was another level of healing that, of course, I needed. It didn't capture everything, right? Because life is a journey, but it took me to another level. It allowed me to finish school. It allowed me to get my degrees. It allowed me to get my license. I became a homeowner very early. Like, I was a hard worker. I believed in doing what I needed to do to make sure my kids never lived life the way that I lived it, never experienced the things that I experienced. But then at some point, Dr. Yolanda, I began to I overcompensated for them. You know what I mean? And so I had to learn something different with that. But to the other transition, you know, by the time I was in high school, I was an alcoholic. Like, I had straight A's. I went to school. I did every activity. I understood how to manipulate people in reference to, you know, if I show up for this, they're not even going to question nothing else. I can sit outside in the school parking lot and get drunk and walk in here like ain't nothing different. And I did it every day.
Wow.
So I know that was something that I had to grow from as well. But I recognized after having children that I couldn't even sleep without drinking. So I would just go home and go to sleep. And Hennessy was the one. And so drink a bottle of Hennessy and I can go to sleep, because prior to that, I couldn't go to sleep and I didn't want to take medicines. So this is what I used to go to sleep. Right. And then this is the thing, because of our environment and the people around us, if they don't think that you're dealing with an addiction or dealing with the problem, then you start being like, oh, I'm cool, because compared to this person, I ain't lose my house. Compared to this person, I ain't lose my job. You know what I mean? Compared to this person, I didn't. So now I'm battling, because people are like, even when I'm saying to people like, dang, I really think I got a drinking problem. No, you don't got no drinking problem. How you got a drinking problem? You go to work every day. I'm like, okay. Then academically, I'm learning, and I'm like, yeah, that ain't what drinking problem mean, y'all. Like, I got a drinking problem.
Yeah, there's no
And
such
so
thing
that's
as being a functional alcoholic. There definitely
Mhm.
is. Mhm.
Yeah. And so academically, I feel like that's how that part of me was able to grow because right, absolutely. I was self-medicating. And so I was dealing with my anxiety. I was dealing with my depression. And at that point, my children's father had got sentenced to 13 years of prison.
Mm.
Early on in high school, he and I both sold drugs. That was what the environment that I grew up in. It wasn't a big deal. So as I was growing and I was trying to figure out who God was in me, and I was trying to figure out who I could be, and I was trying to figure out like, okay, I got kids. I don't want them to see this. What can I do? That wasn't what he decided to learn. And so we grew apart, and he got sentenced to 13 years in prison, which definitely made me a single mom. And I just didn't have a lot of people around me showing me. I was showing
Mm.
them.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was still helping them grow, and I was still able to minister to them. Even, there was times when I would be drunk, Dr. Yolanda, and I could minister to them, and so I really needed, even now, I'm a person where I need my alone time because I need time for God to speak to me because
Yeah.
I dream, God speaks to me. And then there's just moments where, I can write a question down and God will respond. God will answer it,
Mm.
whether it's through a sign, a conversation with you, any of those things, God will answer.
I know that's right. And sometimes that's the best time, you sit in that quiet space so that we can hear him because you have all these outside distractions. You were dealing with people and you were dealing with alcohol and you were dealing with anxiety and you're dealing with all these things, but there's no room for God to come in. And
Right.
so that was one of the things that you realized. But we're going to go to a commercial break and we're going to talk about when we come back, how you even overcame that because now you're this therapist and now you're helping other people. But, what did you have to do to get to that point to where it's like, you know what, I'm going to get this degree, I'm going to go and help other people now. But you had to get to a point to where it's like, okay, enough is enough. I know
Yeah.
I had, I'm seeking God, but what else did you have to do? What steps did you have to take? And so we'll talk about that after the commercial break. And tonight's show is sponsored by GoFig Company. So if you're looking for a company that has an amazing team that can take your brand to another level, whether it's your website, automation, graphics, you name it, that's one of the teams that I recommend that you would go to just get a consult and see if there's anything that they can do for you. So to contact them, you can go to www.gofig.com. Again, that is www.geauxfig.com. All right, Carlotta. So let's talk about, you went through things with your mother. You went through, that identity crisis. You went through domestic violence abuse, more so the emotional part that played the role, in the mental and the psychological piece. And then here it is, now you're dealing with, just trying to figure life out. You're dealing with that alcoholism, you still a functioning alcoholic, a functional minister, so how did you get to the point to where it's okay, enough's enough and I need to talk about how do I move forward?
So I guess first, no matter what the transition is, the first part of it is me accepting what has happened. So like if it was a death, accepting that the loss has happened. If it's a change in the roles of my life, accepting that it has occurred. You know what I mean? Like really being honest with myself about where I am. And in all of those scenarios, one of the first things I had to do was kind of sit up in myself and say, this is really happening. No matter how I feel, I might not want it to be, but this is happening. Like when I had to deal with the drinking thing, I'm like, I'm an alcoholic, no matter what other people are seeing and saying, maybe for them it's okay, but I'm not okay. I don't feel okay about it. And if I can feel okay about it, maybe I'll be okay, but I don't feel okay. And so just accepting what happened. I feel like the next thing is that I always call it like dealing with the caterpillar inside of you. Everybody want to be a butterfly, but there's so many
Right.
things going on inside of us that we don't understand, and we don't take the time to understand why. I was struggling with my identity. I was struggling with my sexual identity. I was struggling with, who I was, who I wanted to be. I feel like outside of being a better person, quote unquote, being a Christian, being a good daughter, being a good mother, I stopped dreaming. I stopped dreaming about what I wanted for me. I just wanted to be there for everybody else. And so I had to start dealing with that stuff. I had to start dealing with, and so I went back to therapy. That's one of the ways I did it. I decided that all of the things that I was thinking about in reference to my triggers, the things that were making me just do all the wrong repeated cycles of stuff that I was doing, I had to be honest. I started putting them on paper. I started journaling about, okay, this is what I did today. This how many times I drunk, this how many times I did this. And so I just started to grow because I was looking at it. You know what I mean? So I'm
Right.
looking at what I'm journaling
accountable.
and holding myself accountable, right? And no matter what other people felt or thought, I had to deal with me. I
Right.
call it the caterpillar inside, because there's an ugly part of us that is very we don't like to talk about. We don't like to talk about the fact that because we went through some sexual abuse, it may make us question our sexual identity. We don't like to talk about the fact that because we went through whatever we've seen our parents go through, that we really for real think that people don't love us. So we're doing everything we can to keep relationships when that's not love, it's fear. When you're afraid to talk to somebody that you love, it's fear. It's not, oh, you love them so much you don't want to hurt them. No, you're scared that they're going to leave. And because you've been abandoned, at the end of the day, you don't want to abandon anybody else. I had to start dealing with all of that. I was overcompensating everywhere. I was overcompensating in friendships. I was overcompensating in even my professional relationships. And so,
Wow.
I found myself doing things, creating programs, right? And then just giving them to people. Like, it's cool. I want to be able to serve God. I don't have to, it's okay. I'm not worried about no money. I know God gonna provide. Yes, God is going to provide, but when he makes you, when he gives you the wisdom to do things, it's okay if you get compensated. And I didn't know that.
Come on. That's right.
And so I just really had to get real with myself. And I had to start watching the people I was around. I had to start watching my behavior. This one time I had a argument actually with one of my cousins, right? And we got into an argument because I felt like her behavior, I just didn't understand it. So I had called her and I'm like, look, I don't understand your behavior. I feel like you're acting a little bit jealous about, it was like about some friendship stuff. It was so stupid, right?
Mhm.
But the response she gave me, even though her tone wasn't right and the way she said it wasn't right, I heard her. And what she said was, you do too much. You do too much. You met this person and you just, anything they need, you there. And you always present. You always this, you always that. Even for me, you do too much. And I was like, yeah, but when I was there for you, you didn't care. You know what I mean? So why do you care if I'm there for somebody else? But what happened is, because I journal, I started looking at it and I started saying, do I do too much?
Maybe she was
Like,
right.
maybe she right. And so she was right. She was definitely right. And so, of course, I mean, over time, I was able to talk to her again. We dealt with the issue. And I had to tell her, like, your tone wasn't right. The reason you said it wasn't even right. The reason behind it was a little selfish, but it was absolutely accurate. It was right.
Wow.
And then I started saying to myself, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? Because I'm not just screaming like, oh, Dr. Yolanda, I want you to love me. I'm not doing that, right? But my actions is.
The actions are saying that.
All people, and you can't do that. You cannot be all things to all people, because the moment you can't be there, you done train people that you don't count. You done train people that it's okay to step over your boundaries. You done train people that it's okay to treat you any type of way. And so now you're dealing with the same stuff repeatedly, because people don't respect your boundaries because you ain't made them respect none.
Right. And it's all a part of people pleasing. It's all a part of, if I do all this, it's like buying your friends and buying your relationships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, the opposite, the people on the opposite end, These are things that they're expecting all the time. So
Listen, all the time.
the minute you go off the beaten path, they'll be like, you the problem. But at the end of the day, it's
Listen.
like, we created this problem. We created the
I did.
problem. You know?
I did.
So
I did. And that's the caterpillar
powerful that you
inside.
said.
Like, I'm not saying to people verbally that I want to be there for you all the time, because I never want you to walk away from me. But that's what I was doing.
Right.
And when I started to increase my self-care, it was based off of my illness. I literally almost died twice. And originally the doctors had no clue why. I ended up getting diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And that battle almost completely took my life. And I had to use the same principles. I had to get real with where I was. I had to get real with the fact that I couldn't live life the way I used to live it. I was stripped of everything that I had. Some of it I just gave away, Dr. Yolanda. I own my home. I had probably spent about $30,000 alone just making my home how I wanted it to be. And I just called the bank and said, come get it. Come get it. I'm tired. I don't want to be anymore. Come get it. And I really did that. Like, I really did that. But I was so far in my depression that I couldn't see myself. And so I had to do the same thing over again. I had to start getting real with what I felt. I had to get real with the fact that I can't be all things to all people. And all those people who I've been there for 24/7, they wasn't around to assist me in picking up my pieces. And so my role in their lives changed. I couldn't be their provider. I couldn't pay their bills. I couldn't even pay my own bills. You know what I mean? So I had spent all this time advocating for everybody else. And when it was time to advocate for me, I wasn't even advocating for me. And so God just began, I disrupted my entire life. So I don't want to say it like I just all of a sudden did the right thing. I really didn't. I disrupted my entire life. I moved to California for a year. And when I moved to California, the real plan for me was I just never wanted to come back. I wanted to go to California and give my children to their godparents. I wanted to take them away from any potential drama, so that if I died, it's how crazy the mindset is, because I know this ain't really what's going to happen, right? But I'm like, well, if I die, I am in California. I'm far, far away from Ohio. Ain't nobody going to come trying to take my kids. They'll be in a safe place, but I am done with life. And I don't remember all of the things that happened, but God began to give me small things to see. And I sat there one day on the couch and was just like, I got to get up. I got to get up. I might be in pain every day. I might struggle. I can't live the way I used to live. I can't do all the physical things I used to do. I love sports. I played basketball. I taught my children how to do football, basketball, soccer, everything they did. I was the person outside in the yard teaching them. I couldn't do those things no more. So it was breaking my heart. But I had to learn a different way of life. So I pulled out the same tools, Dr. Yolanda. I started getting real with where I was. I got real with my role in people's life. I started learning that I taught those people that I didn't matter. So when I'm telling people I can't do it, they like, what you mean you can't do it? You know, what you mean you can't be there for us? What you mean you can't show up? What you mean you can't go to lunch? Well, baby, I can't pay my bills. How I'm about to go travel with you? You know what I mean? And so it was so many outrageous things, but I had taught people that was okay. Yep. And then the final thing would just be, I had to get grounded in my word. I really had to wake up every single day and start reading my word. I had to really enter into a prayer life like never before, because I was in a very dark place. And like I said, I gave everything away. I came back to Ohio with nothing, no job, no license. I had to go back and take my license all over again. With nothing. I came back with nothing. And really, because of the things I was allowing the doctors to say, I never thought I would work again. It was just like, oh, it's over. And so I had to retrain myself. I had to really focus on shifting my words. I had to shift my words to what I believe God said about me and not what other people said about me. And I think that I had to take in small pieces from wherever they came. You know what I mean? So it might be when I'm talking to the lady at the grocery store and she might say one thing and I got to just hold that thing. It might be when I'm talking to my son and he say one thing and I'm like, okay, hold that. Now I'm talking to this girl I just met and we cool now, we friends. And she's telling me that you smart, you this, you that. I got to hold that, because whatever energy comes to me and I'm giving back out, then it's going to grow. right? Like the grass ain't greener on the other side. It's greener wherever you water it at. And so
That's
I
it.
just began to do that. I started to rewater my life, and it really shifted me. It shifted me. And so I had began to go through that shift, and then both of my parents died. And so then the same principles, Dr. Yolanda, had to be used again, because I felt like I was just getting in this good place with my mom. I was able to talk to her about whatever. I was able to do anything with her. And so we had all these plans, like, we had started talking about the domestic violence. We had started talking about the effect on me. And my mom was like, look, you got to quit being afraid to do it. Like, you got the words. I don't. You know how to do this and this and this, and I don't. And then even with that, my mother began to tell me, like, listen, it ain't ever that we didn't love you. It's always that we knew that you would be okay. It's always that we knew that you were stronger than us. They seen something inside of me even when I was a little girl. I'm not saying it was always right. I'm not saying that it should have been laid on me in that manner, but they seen something inside of me. My mother's mother used to call me a doctor, right? And so it was things that they did that I didn't see them the way I needed to see them before. But once I was able to talk, I was able to hold those things. God doesn't always give you what you need the way you think it's going to come, but it will come. God always gives us what we need. You know what I mean? God will supply all of our needs, all of them, every single thing that we need. And so I just started picking up scriptures. And so I would use a scripture a day. I would journal about it. I would journal how it was, however it went in my life at that moment. Psalms 112. I would be like, look, I will look to the hills from which cometh my help. All of my help comes from the Lord. So when I would have a moment where I was crying or sad, or I had to be like, okay, it's okay to cry. Because that's the other thing I had learned in life, that it wasn't okay to cry. It was okay to cry. And so I would cry, and I would just say, okay, God, I need your help. I don't know how to do this. I'm tired, or, whatever it was, and get up. I had to get up. And so I feel like the same principles apply, just on different levels every single time, every single time. So, I know that everything that I've ever been through, it is truly for his glory. It's truly because, and ultimately, I don't think anything else would have shown me how to take care of myself, Dr. Yolanda. I was so far in to taking care of everybody else that I don't think I would have ever did it any other time. You know what I mean? If I still had the means to pay everybody's bills, hey, Dr. Yolanda, you want your bills paid too? I got you. I don't ever want you to feel bad. I mean, that's just really what I was doing. And so I don't think that I wouldn't have learned any other way. And so God had to increase my vision.
Mm-hmm. He had to pull you out of that thing.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Amen. Well, I thank you so much. I mean, this has been absolutely amazing to hear your story, of overcoming several things, not just one thing in life, but several things. You were able to impart pieces that maybe just that one person needed to hear about the domestic violence, or that one person needed to hear about the anxiety, or that one thing that person needed to hear about the alcoholism, and show them you can still overcome all those things, right? You can overcome those things. Yes, it's okay to seek a therapist. Yes, it's okay to surrender to God and sit down and be still and let God talk to you, right? Like really, really sit in that and soak in that thing, So I just thank you for your authenticity. I thank you for, your encouraging story, right? And just being authentic. I mean, because some people, like I said earlier in the show, some people will come and sugarcoat some stuff, but no, you came and you laid it all out for them and say, yep, this is me. This is what I've gone through. Thank God I don't look like what I've been through. And now you're using what you've gone through to help other people and serving in the right capacity instead of giving, right? Instead of just freely giving, you're serving in the capacity where you can help people. And then guess what? Still put some money in your pocket. Yes, you can get paid for what you do. Y'all hear me? You can get paid for what you do. You don't have to buy people. You don't have to keep giving stuff to people. So thank you so much. And before we close the show out tonight, Carlotta, are there any last minute words or anything encouraging that you want to give to the viewing and listening audience? And then before we go totally out of the broadcast, also let people know how they can connect with you if they wanted to connect with you.
Yes. So right now, you can reach me on Instagram and Facebook at Carlotta Speaks. What I would just say to anyone who is listening or who have found yourself in any of these stories where you fit, don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit. Life is a journey. And so don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to face what you have to face, because if you don't face it, you cannot move on from it. If you don't deal with it, you cannot move on from it. And so don't quit. If you have to take a break, but don't quit. Love you enough to show up for you. And so no matter what happens in life, keep loving you, keep learning more about you, and keep loving you. And then ultimately put God first. Without God, I know that I would not be here today. I know that there's been times in my life where the devil really wanted me to lose my mind, where the devil wanted me to really quit in life. And it is God that sustained me.
Powerful. Amen. Y'all heard it. She said it was God that sustained her. Amen.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you so much for being such a phenomenal guest on my show tonight. For those of you who are just tuning in, you missed it, but you can go back and you can go catch the replay from the very beginning where we talk with the coach and author Carlotta, also a licensed therapist who has shared her story and her heart about overcoming major transitions. So tune in next week. We have another special guest as always. All my guests are special. That's what I'm gonna say. They are all special and in a positive way. So tune in next Thursday at the same time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And look, I'm gonna say, as I always say, if nobody has told you that they love you today, know that I love you, but most of all, our God loves you. Take care and be blessed, and we'll see you again next week. I am Dr. Yolanda Jerry, and we are out.